believe squirrels are pests because of the damages they can do to your home and surrounding area. And although this may be true, squirrels are also equally important to your ecosystem, providing smaller prey to predatory animals such as lynx, marten, or predatory birds. But if you do have a squirrel problem and they're damaging your home or property, infrastructure, or anything else that you have, then this may be a quick and easy way to fix it. Welcome, honorable judges, parents, fellow 4-H members, and competitors. I chose this topic because I used to own laying hens, and the squirrels had found a way into the hen house and started to eat our eggs. We didn't want them to make a habit of this, so I spoke with my dad about some of the ways we could fix this. And one of our suggestions that we thought of was a squirrel pole. Now, I thought that it was an interesting solution because I had never heard of this before. And I decided to delve a little further into what surrounded a squirrel pole. And, just because it sounded interesting, and maybe I'd like to get my own trapping license one day. Scientists have discovered more than 279 different species of squirrels and have categorized them under 3 main categories: a ground squirrel, flying squirrel, or a tree squirrel. Now, our snare pole will mainly only be targeting tree squirrels and flying squirrels, mainly because ground squirrels are rarely seen high in the trees, whereas tree squirrels are rarely seen on the ground. Squirrels are resilient, or they have the ability to recover quickly from harsh conditions. They have a really good reproduction rate, they have large dispersal, and they occur in large numbers locally. Because of this, trappers cannot fully exploit or take advantage of these numbers. Because of this, they're very good for sustainable harvest, and the squirrel pole will generally only target the transient squirrels, or the squirrels that are the least secure in the population and have more likely left the nest later than the other squirrels, more recently left the nest. Now, to find a snare pole, you haven't made any snares yet, but you need the pole to start. Go out and find a pole about 4 centimeters in diameter, give or take a little bit. Once you have found one that you think is good, cut it so it is about 5 to 10 feet long. Then you have it pretty good, right? But there's still branches and knobs on it. Now these can interfere with the snares, so you want to cut them off as best as you can. But leave the bark on as best as possible. This will provide good purchase for the squirrels to be using, rather than if it was slicker because they're not using it because of the bark has taken off. It'll be harder for them to get grip on it, and they may not use it as often as they would if it was easier for them to use it with the bark. So now you have the pole and you've cut off the branches and knobs. But now it's just a branch with bark on it. You don't have any snares yet. So let's make one. Find some trapping wire, or if you don't have any, you could use 16-pound tested stainless steel fishing wire. Now, to make a smaller eye, you can use a smaller nail or screwdriver. So, cut out about 18 inches of wire and grab that nail or screwdriver. If you don't want to use one, that's fine. It's just harder on your fingers and you might not create as good as a smaller eye. So to create the eye, you just make a hook like that. Now you want to take this end and wrap it around itself again to create the eye. Now take this end, which will be the snare head, and pull it through the eye, like this. Now adjust the snare head. The loop of the head should be about 1.5 inches in diameter. This way it'll go around the head of the squirrel, but won't pass the shoulders. So now you have the loop, but it's not on the snare pole yet. So to attach it, you want to take this end with your pole, wrap it around a few times, as much as you feel is reasonable, and then push it over top. Now it's on the pole. So if you feel like it's not very good spacing above the pole, you can push this outwards a little bit so it's more of a half moon. And then make sure that your loop is about 1 1/4 over top of the pole. Now the reason why you can add this is now if a squirrel gets stuck in your snare, it'll fall over and have a gravity-assisted humane death. But if you were to add more than one snare to your pole, you can estimate how far apart you want to space them. But make sure that if you were to have a squirrel fall off and get stuck on the snare, and if another squirrel were to come to that snare, or at least one beside it, and they were also going to get stuck and they fall off, that it cannot grab the other squirrel and haul itself back up onto the pole. Well, now you have your snare pole, but you haven't placed it anywhere. So where do you want to put it? Go out and look for larger coniferous trees, preferably one with a squirrel midden on the bottom, or underneath of it. A squirrel midden is the place where a squirrel has discarded all of the other food, or I guess the crust of its food, that it won't eat because there is no good nutritional value of using its energy to eat that and digest it. Now get a tree across from it and attach your pole. But before you attach it, make sure you have it at a reasonable height that you can reach up comfortably. But a land predator cannot grab a squirrel if it were to fall off from a snare. Now that you have found a place that is comfortable to reach, nail in one side. This will keep it secure even if it is windy. Now take the other end that is not nailed in and put it on a Y or a fork. Perhaps where you've attached it, a limb has attached to a trunk. Now don't nail this part in. This way, even if it is really windy out, it won't fall off of the trees because it is nailed in one end and hooked in the other. It will move with the trees. Because if you were to nail in both ends, if it were to be windy out, the snare pole might rip itself off. And then it would not be of no use because it would have been on the ground rather than in a tree where squirrels could use it. But if you were to put the snare pole somewhere other than in the trees, you can always attach it to a fence and a building or a fence and a pole by, again, nailing it in on one side and hooking it on the other, because the buildings may also move slightly in the wind or may get pushed or touched in some way and you don't want them falling off. But because a building is not a tree and does not have a fork in the branches or in the limbs, you could always take a screw or a nail and put it in on a diagonal. This way, with this, and you've screwed it in like this, it creates another Y, which you can hook in that side of the branch. Now you have the snare pole. but you haven't yet baited it. Because you're not sure, perhaps, if the squirrels may use it now because it's new to their environment. So you decided to put something on it to attract the squirrels through the pool. Although squirrels are mainly herbivores, and which meaning they eat really only plants and nuts, then that's fine if you want to try to use some sort of plant. But people have found that squirrels will also get attracted to meat if you'd like to use meat as a bait. To secure the meat onto the pole, you can use a small nail or a wire to fasten it. Although people have used meat, we prefer to use other things such as peanut butter, which we have found works equally as well and stays where it's put, doesn't fall off, and still attracts squirrels. Now, in conclusion, a squirrel pole is an easy and low-cost, effective, and targeted way to fix a squirrel problem that you may have for your infrastructure or property.